All Milioni needs is a country that has an extradition treaty with the US and a police force ready to assist, the DEA. And he knows just the place.
DEA has a strong presence in Thailand, work very closely with the Thai National Police and their Justice Ministry. The Thais have never let down DEA.
Bout may know that Thailand has an extradition treaty with the US, but then so do many countries where he does business. But Thailand is also ideal for Bout, far away and familiar.
There was information that the DEA had that Viktor had spent time in Thailand before and felt comfortable there. So everyone felt comfortable in Thailand.
14 days after the failed Romanian sting, Carlos reaches out to Simulian and Bout. Can they meet in a hotel in Bangkok, Thailand?
Viktor said, sure, I'll see you there in a few days.
The DEA team race to Bangkok. Surveillance has to be in place before Bout arrives. His travel through Bangkok needs to be monitored throughout the city.
The Thai National Police provided all of the mobile surveillance on the street that were following targets to and from airports as they moved around metropolitan areas in taxis. This is tough work. It's hard work, and every bit of it has to be coordinated, choreographed, because you just can't make any mistakes or it's all over with, and people can die.
With everything in place, undercover Interpol agents in Moscow send word that Bout is leaving the city. Bout has always traveled alone to avoid drawing attention to himself, and this time is no different.
You imagine a boss flanked by all these bodyguards and protecting him, and here's Viktor kind of traveling, by himself, a red eye from, it seemed like such an ordinary situation except for the stakes.
From head of special operations Mike Braun in Washington to special agents in Bangkok, the DEA team waits anxiously as Bout's plane flies southeast to Thailand. It's a non-stop flight from Moscow to Bangkok. Will Bout's plane make an unexpected diversion again? After 9 hours, Mike Braun gets a call.
Bout actually stepped off the aircraft, cleared customs.
Bout is en route to the hotel. If he spots anything suspicious on the way, Bout might slink off into the city he knows well and vanish for good. 15,000 kilometers from their comfort zone and dependent on local police, this is the DEA's last chance to corner the so-called merchant of death. On the route from the airport to the city, Bout's every move is under constant surveillance by the DEA and Thai police.
From the time that Viktor lands at the airport, the DEA has to make sure that he gets to the hotel. They have informants set up in toll booths along the way, making sure that Viktor's car was moving.
Once he gets to the hotel, Bout is met by middleman Simulian and the DEA's undercover operative known as Carlos, who's posing as a member of FARC, a Colombian terrorist group. Bout is led into a conference room, rigged with hidden cameras.
You see a man walking into a situation that is telling him in so many ways not to go in. There are so many danger signals there.
In pursuit of a quick profit, Bout has traveled to a country that has close ties with the US. He hasn't discovered Carlos is an undercover operative, and he hasn't arranged his own location for the meeting.
It was Viktor Bout convinced of his own business immortality, convinced that let me deal with this. I'll go there on my own because I'm Viktor Bout. I'm the personal brand. They want to deal with me, not an underling. There's no salesman like me. That kind of arrogance is what did for Viktor Bout. It was ego.
In a nearby room, DEA agents and Thai police look for a signal, a coded call from Carlos to move in. "9,000 miles away in Washington, Mike Braun waits for news of the mission. But before Carlos makes the call, he needs Bout to admit that he's supplying weapons to FARC, knowing they'll be used to kill Americans in Colombia. This admission is critical to ensuring Bout's conviction. If he's willing to sell arms to kill Americans, then under US law, that makes him a terrorist.
Viktor takes out a piece of paper at one point and says, let's make up a list of the things you need. And they start going off, and and Carlos is asking for missiles, and Viktor's kind of saying, well, what else do you need?
Carlos picks this moment to make his play. He reminds Bout that the arms will be used to take out helicopters flown by US pilots.
Bout clearly understood that FARC's hatred for the United States, long-standing, and that was a natural part of the discussion.
With that admission on the record, it's time for Carlos to make the call.
The door gets kicked open, and in come Thai police.
Even as he's held at gunpoint, Bout makes what looks to be a threatening move.
Bout has got his hands in his briefcase, and the Thai National Police ordered him to remove his hands.
If he doesn't do what they say, he will be shot on sight.
Fortunately for Mr. Bout, he complied with their orders, and he slowly removed his hands from the briefcase.
Viktor and Smulian are arrested, and Carlos steps away.
The Merchant of Death is in custody. Braun gets the first call.
They gave me a quick synopsis of what had happened, and I told them they had done a great job, and I was proud of them.
And Braun shares the news with Juan Zarate at the NSC, who never expected the DEA to come good on their promise so quickly.
I contacted Juan. He was amazed that it had only taken about probably 6 or 7 months to do what other countries and agencies and departments had not been able to do.
Bout is imprisoned in a Thai jail, but his extradition to the US is delayed. The Russian government objects to one of its citizens being arrested in this way.
The Russian government applied tremendous pressure to have the Thai government turn Bout over to them for justice.
And in Thailand, a major tug of war begins between the US and Russia.
It kept seeming like it would go one way and then the other. I mean, at some point, the Thai authorities said, no, absolutely, he'll go back to Russia. And then America protested, and okay, we'll think again. And for Thailand, this was a very, very uncomfortable situation because they knew they were going to alienate one of two great powers. So it was horrible for them, and it rumbled on with objections and objections. And time and again, even the Americans thought they'd got him out. They had planes idling on runways repeatedly, just in anticipation of, I think it's going to be today. Oh no, it's not today. And it went on and on.
The Russian government fight tooth and nail to try and get Bout back on Russian soil. He is held in a Thai prison while the courts decide. But after 2 years, the US finally wins the extradition battle, and Bout is flown to New York to face trial. But on the 2nd of November 2011, Viktor Bout is found guilty of all 4 charges against him, including conspiring to kill US citizens and providing material support to a terrorist organization. Bout denies that he has been involved in any criminal activity, claiming that he was never an arms dealer, that any weapons his companies supplied were legitimate and not in breach of sanctions or international law. He is sentenced to 25 years in a federal prison with no possibility of parole. Bout is currently incarcerated at the US Penitentiary in Marion, Illinois.